Happy to be here, and thanks to Buddy and Jonathan for inviting me to speak today. So we'll figure out through the talk what these acronyms mean, but the title of my talk is PROMs and PREMs, Incorporating Patients' Voices in Dialysis Care and Research. So these are the key questions that we'll address here today. So the first is, what is a patient-reported outcome measure, or PROM, and why do they matter for patients on dialysis? The second question is, why should we think about PROMs in dialysis innovation? And I'll give an example of one PROM that I've been involved with developing that's called the HARC. We'll then talk about what a patient-reported experience measure is, or PREM, and then we'll talk about why we should consider PREMs when dialysis may be moving predominantly from the center to the home, perhaps in the future, and an example of one PREM that I've been involved in developing called the home DCE. So we'll start with this first question. So just, why did I get interested in this whole area? Well, I think it's a recognition during the course of my clinical work about just the incredible burden that advanced kidney disease poses for individuals as well as population health. So patients undergoing dialysis have high rates of hospitalization, high rates of disability. There's many physical and emotional symptoms that occur. They take 20 different medications. They have access-related complications that we've heard about today. There's dietary restrictions. Oh yeah, and if they're on in-center dialysis, it's 3 times a week. If they're at home, it might be 5 to 7 days a week. Okay. And as a nephrologist, this is what I'm trained to do. Right? We go around to the dialysis unit. And we look at the numbers. All right. So what's the dialysis adequacy? What's the KT over V? We look at mineral and bone disease markers, the calcium, the phosphorus, the PTH. We look at the potassium and the blood pressure. And sometimes we forget that these are not the outcomes that matter to patients mostly. It can be hard to wait and remember, how is the patient feeling? How are they functioning? How are they experiencing their care? Okay? We should not let this happen, right? The nephrologist comes around and says, congratulations, your labs look great, I'll be back next month. And the dialysis patient says, my whole life is affected, I cannot sleep, I can't bend over, exercise, I can't eat and drink whatever I like. This is why I got interested in this area. Okay. So one of the ways to battle against this is to look and focus on patient-centered outcomes, which many times are what are called patient-reported outcomes. So how is this defined? Well, the FDA defines a patient-reported outcome as any report of the status of a patient's health condition that comes directly from the patient, right, without any interpretation by someone else. And when we talk about PROs in the literature, we're often talking about PRO measures, or PROMs, which are basically survey tools that can give us information on different aspects of the patient's experience, so health-related quality of life, symptoms, physical functioning, or the patient's experience. Sorry, I keep forgetting to advance. Okay. So why should we care about PROMs in nephrology? Well, the first point is that PROMs expand the patient's voice in clinical care and research. They ensure that outcomes that are important to patients are included in clinical trials. And we know that issues around symptoms and quality of life are not fully captured by doctors in their routine clinical care. Additionally, PROMs capture unique patient information. So, by definition, these are not evident in laboratory tests and physical exams. And finally, administration of PROMs is actually mandated in the U.S. for dialysis, which many of us know. The KDQL, for example, and a patient experience measure that we'll get back to called the ICH CAPS. The other point is that we know from studies, so the SONG initiative, Standardized Outcomes in Nephrology initiative, has done a number of studies to look at what do patients and caregivers actually care about. And it turns out that patients prioritize symptoms and quality of life factors above laboratory values and other things that nephrologists traditionally focus on. This is just an example slide from the SONG Hemodialysis Initiative, and it's kind of small, but this ranks in order the importance to patients and caregivers of different factors, right? And what's right up there at the top is fatigue and energy, resilience and coping, ability to travel. And the one way down there at the bottom is phosphate. Okay. Okay, so key questions. So why should we think about PROMs in dialysis innovation? Okay, this is just my list here. So in my opinion, I think all of us would agree that new dialysis technologies will change many aspects of the interface and relationship between individuals and kidney replacement therapy. So we've heard about a lot of these already in the last 2 days. Wearable devices, implantable devices, xenotransplant, new types of vascular access. Again, these represent new interfaces between the patient and technology. And existing methods for measurement of how patients feel or function may not apply to the new technology. So there's a need to develop new ways to measure or develop PROMs to allow outcomes research and clinical decision making. So just one example of a project that I've been involved with is a new PROM called the Hemodialysis Access Related Quality of Life Instrument, or HARQ. Right? And the background for this is we know that vascular access remains the lifeline for hemodialysis patients. We've heard about this ad nauseum today. And new innovations in vascular access, which we've also heard about, have arrived and more are coming. But really there have not been robust patient-reported outcome measures for vascular access that are available. So I was involved in a group of investigators that sought to develop a new instrument called the HARQ. And the goal here, very simply, is to develop a measure to fully capture and differentiate between patient experiences with current access types that could also be used for novel future vascular access technologies. I won't go through this just for the purposes of time and detail, but this is the study methodology that we use. There was literature review, focus groups with almost 40 patients, as well as some interviews with healthcare providers. And the results of these focus groups revealed that the following aspects of care were most important for patients with respect to vascular access. So patients identified worry and fear, physical symptoms, and appearance as the greatest impacts of vascular access on health-related quality of life. And in terms of the most burdened symptoms themselves, needle pain, skin problems, swelling and bruising, and numbness. Okay? And some other things that obviously doctors worry a lot about, infection risk, were important, but they were only just one aspect of these many different factors that were very important. So we did develop a final draft instrument, 12 question groups, 47 items. This is just an example of what some of the items look like. And the hope is that this will be used in research to allow development and contribute to patients selecting, along with their nephrologist, the right access for the right patient at the right time. Okay, we'll go on now to what a PREM is. So what is a patient-reported experience measure? Well, this is really a PROM, a PRO measure, that is focused on patients' experience interacting with the healthcare environment. So the goal is to ascertain from patients whether something that should happen actually happened, or how often it happened. And this is not satisfaction. Okay, that's different. Okay. So why should we care about PREMs? Well, one is that providing an optimal patient experience is clearly identified by patients as an expectation for high-quality medical care. And we also know that higher scores on these PREM measures have been associated with things that everyone cares about, including reduced hospitalizations and fewer ED visits, reduction in patient no-show rates, improved medication adherence. And then something that we care about in the United States is that this information is publicly reported and can be used by patients to actually select their healthcare providers. The final point here is, why should we consider PREMs when dialysis moves from the center to the home? And we'll use this instrument called the home DCE as an example. Okay, so the background for this, I'm not going to go into this, of course, but we know here in the US that home dialysis proportional use has grown rapidly over the last decade, or 15 years. And in the purple box, you can see that although patient experience of care is assessed twice annually for patients undergoing in-center hemodialysis, there has been no tool available that has been robustly developed for assessment of patient experience of care for home dialysis. And I think one of the patient advocates who stepped up here yesterday and said, "Where's my survey?" Right, this is the gap we're trying to fill. Okay, so we received some funding from Satellite Healthcare a number of years ago now to develop and evaluate a new survey instrument for assessment of patient experience of care in home dialysis. And we used a multi-stakeholder model to do this research. So just a little bit about the process that we followed. We had a structured literature. We've tried to ensure we weren't reinventing the wheel of something that was out there already. And ultimately, we found nearly 50 papers and 10 patient-reported experience instruments for which we drew items so as not to reinvent the wheel, although we did end up writing many of our own as well. We did a series of focus groups and interviews among patients, care partners, and also healthcare providers. We then transcribed and coded these and came up with a list of patient-important aspects of care that then went into a national web-based prioritization survey where we asked nearly 100 patients undergoing home dialysis currently in the United States from different areas of the country to really rank what is most important to you in evaluating the quality of care that's delivered for you in the dialysis center for your home dialysis. Okay? And ultimately, we selected items based on the results of this and drafted a survey tool considering things like survey burden and length of time it takes to fill these things out, as we understand that dialysis patients are surveyed a lot. Okay. So this is just a snapshot of some results from the prioritization survey. Here's some examples of aspects of care most likely to be ranked as extremely important by patients when it comes to their home dialysis care. So things are like care coordination, the kidney doctor and the dialysis center staff working well together as a team, knowing who to call if you have a problem with dialysis at home, and the staff listening carefully to you and feeling supported when you're calling the home dialysis center for help. Okay, and you can read some of the other aspects. I didn't show it here, but healthcare providers had actually, interestingly, a relatively similar list of items. So there was concordance between the groups. This is the final draft instrument. It's available in 3 languages now. There's 26 items in 10 domains. It's about half the length of the ICH caps, which we're pretty proud of. We then took it into a series of evaluation steps, also funded graciously by Satellite Healthcare. We administered the instrument to almost 500 patients undergoing PD or home hemo around the country. And I think we got a pretty good snapshot of different race, self-reported ethnicities, geographic area, and home dialysis modality, as well as language. And really, we found that in going through this, there was one multi-item scale that was supported of those 26 items, a 12-item composite scale, 2 general ranking items, and then a number of solo items. And won't go through the psychometric testing properties here, but happy to answer questions later about it. And the median survey completion time was only 10 minutes, okay, which is great. The ICH CAPS takes between 18 and 20 minutes. And, importantly, we didn't find any significant association with patient characteristics, which I think is good. If you find that one particular patient group is always answering a certain way, then there's issues with generalizability there. So these are the key points from the talk today. So PROMs and PREMs are important for bringing patients' voices to dialysis-related research and care. In my opinion, new dialysis technologies will change many aspects of the interface and relationship between individuals and kidney replacement therapies. Development of new PROMs or adaptation of existing PROMs may be required to capture the effects of these technologies on how patients feel and function, and then I just gave a couple of examples of instruments I've been involved with. So just the acknowledgments, and I'll stop there. Did I do okay on time, Larry? All right, thumbs up.